Matt happened to send me an email, kind of out of the blue. And I said, hey, we were just talking about this in our Wealth Building Wednesday classes. And so he got to coordinate with Becca, and Becca got him in here. And hey, thank you, Matt, for taking time to come and visit us. I know that a lot of people were very, very excited to hear about 1031 exchanges.
Right.
Because I think some of them want to do them themselves. Some of them are probably gonna be helping clients do them. I'll let you take the floor.
Okay,
and-
great. I'll tell you, I always like to hear that people are excited at the beginning of the talk, and I hope that you're still excited after we finish the talk today. So, as Andy said, my name is Matt, and I serve as market president for Banker Exchange. We're a qualified intermediary, so all I do all day long is talk with taxpayers, with their attorneys, with their CPAs, with the brokers and agents about 1031 like kind of thing. It's my life. For about 20 years of my professional life, is what I have dedicated myself to. So, not everybody is pleased around the kitchen table when I begin to talk about work. You know, nobody likes to hear what I have to say, but I truly have a passion for it. And I just want to start out by saying, I'm not a salesperson. And you are not salespeople. What we truly do is we bring solutions to the table for our clients. That's what we do. And a 1031 like-kind exchange is just another arrow in your quiver of solutions for your client. And so today I want to look at exactly what a 1031 is. I want to show you from a tax perspective the amounts of taxes that actually can be deferred in one of these 1031s. We want to go over the types of properly qualified, types that do not qualify, time frames, identification, how much money you have to spend, all these things which circle around having a successful commute. So just a quick question, how many of you have had experience with a 1031? Okay. I know some people might not even know a 1031 is going on until you happen to look at the closing statement, and all of a sudden there's a little line at the bottom that says money to qualified intermediary. So let's talk about the background and how it works. But first, this is where I'm from. So I always promote Pilot Mountain wherever I go. And you would not believe the places that I go around this country and talk with folks, and I say, I live here, and they'll go, I've never heard of that. And I'm like, just wait a minute, that's exactly right. Jolo's getting his way up there. But yeah, Indy River, if you've ever seen that, then it's Mount Pilot. And my wife happens to be the director of the Andy Griffith Museum in Mount Airy. So she's much more famous and popular than I am. So, and everybody knows Mount Pilot. So I always say, you know, think about Pilot Mountain, think about me, think about 1031s.
Now, wasn't there a fire at
There have been two. So this was last year, during the, early spring, that basically the whole mountain burned over. And it was just the leaves and the underbrush, really no trees were affected. It was actually a good thing. It started out as a bad thing, but ended up kind of being a good thing, is now they're having, growth come back that hasn't, been present on the mountain for years and years. So it was actually, and a spectacular thing to see. Again, bad, but it was amazing to see. It really was. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. The knob you can't climb, but along the kind of the slope up to the pinnacle, there's a series of rock ledges that a lot of people climb on. So great place, 750,000 unique visitors to Pilot Mountain State Park every year. The problem we have is in Pilot Mountain is getting those 750,000 people to bridge the 2-mile gap to downtown Pilot Mountain. That's the issue we face.
I didn't know they had it downtown, because me, my husband.
See, well, I don't know. Well, it's not much of one, but we have to, you know, we're hoping it'll be case in point. That's exactly right. We're trying to overcome. So, yeah, usually if it's a 1031 down at the bottom of the closing statement, HUD statement, whatever it may be, it'll say, to Banker Exchange as qualified intermediary for whoever the seller happens to be, and it'll give a line amount, and that amount is what goes to the qualified intermediary. So it'll be broken out in that closing statement.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, doesn't the library already have to notice the 1031 exchange part of closing, because don't they have to sign forms to get permission for that?
They do, yeah. So typically it's kind of boilerplate in their buy-sell contracts now. They usually have a little piece in there. If you don't want to have something that you could add just from the contract standpoint. But from the qualified intermediary, yes, when we prepare the exchange agreement, we're going to prepare a notice of exchange, which the seller or the buyer of our client's property and the seller of the replacement property both have to sign to say, I recognize the temporary plan. It meets an IRS requirement that both sides of the transaction have to be notified. Absolutely.
You said may be done, so it's not like once they acknowledge that, it may be, it doesn't have to be.
Doesn't have to be,
Okay.
yeah. On the exchange agreement, it's just saying that you might have to sign a piece of paperwork that says, you know.
If we choose to do this.
Absolutely, yeah. So what are all these questions surrounding? And it all comes back to this piece of IRS Treasury Reg Code. And basically what it tells us is this: if you're a taxpayer who owns a piece of property, real property, that has been held for either business or use in trade or for investment, then if you sell that piece of property and you buy another piece of property that you're going to hold for investment, business, or trade, useful trade, then you have the ability to defer the taxes that you would normally owe on the sale, on the gain of that property. So this code, 1031s have been around for 100 years. That's how long they've been around. And throughout those 100 years, there have been tweaks and modifications to the code. And today we have a well-vetted, well-tested code that holds up in court. I mean, it's just a wonderfully precise piece of Treasury regulation. And this is how exciting I get. Okay, I get excited about this stuff. And the reason I share that with you is a lot of times I will hear people say that a 1031 is a tax loophole. And I'm here to tell you that it is not a tax loophole. No one is getting away with anything, and no one is going underneath the radar to duck the IRS by doing a 1031. The IRS knows about it. They're the ones who allow us to do it, and they've given us very exact rules of how we must do it to make it successful. So nobody's getting away with anything by doing a 1031. They're only helping themselves.
When that says what it says, they're not getting the laws that they're recognized on the extreme real property. So it doesn't matter what you purchase the property for, what you sell it for. If you're exchanging one property for another, that's all they're looking at.
Yes and no. So they do care at the end of the day how it is that you use that property, but they also care, depending on the time frame as far as how long you've owned that piece of property. They care about why you bought it, how you used it throughout the time, and what your current use is, whether it's used. So we'll talk about that, kind of what that qualified use of the property is. So what we're talking about when it comes to taxes, first off, let's start with the more expensive piece as far as the rates go. The IRS is going to tax the depreciation recapture. So that amount of money that the IRS allows you to deduct every single year through depreciation of an investment property, when you sell that piece of property, all that depreciation you've taken, as much of that is, and I'll go over an example here in a minute, as much as that's contributed to the gain of the property, it's taxed at 25%. Then you have your capital gains tax, which is either going to be 15 or 20%. And then we have our net investment income tax, which is 3.8%. Then we have our state tax. If you happen to live in a state that holds or has a state tax, which of course North Carolina does, you're looking at the state tax rate as well. So you see there's a pretty good stack of taxes that are really attacking the gain in that property. So let's look at. I want to look at, let me go back one second. Okay, so yes, the tax deferral, that's one of the main reasons that someone would want to do a 1031. But in enjoying the ability to defer that tax, there are some other strategies that a lot of the clients I work with are really looking at initially. So consolidation or diversification. So when I'm working with a client who owns a larger portfolio of single family rental properties, and let's just say they have 10 or 12 properties, really doesn't matter. We're looking to sell that portfolio of 10 to 12, and we want to use those money to buy one individual larger property. Maybe it's they're tired of the time trash and toilet, and maybe the marriage is almost all apart because of financial issues and having to look forward and all the things that happen. Somebody has to get up for, but they will sell out of those multiple properties and go to one main property. And vice versa, if someone owns one of the larger properties, maybe it's say that he's doing so well at the time, we might need the income out of one property. They can sell that one, they would multiple properties in different areas, different types of asset classes of properties. That's possible. From a leverage standpoint, at the end of the day, they're going to have more equity coming out of their sale. More equity means the ability to better leverage and gain more debt on the backside, so you're actually able to buy up from what you're selling. Leverage is key at the very level. Absolutely.
So, say I have a property, and I use it as a rental property, we used to live in, but then I moved out. I rented it a couple of years, and, I sold it. So I'm also going to buy, I'm also in the contract with new construction, which is not going to close the same year that I sold. How is that?
Okay, so you can convert a primary residence to a rental use.
You can't.
You can, absolutely. And if you've lived in it 2 out of 5 years, of course, you can claim that as a primary residence. And if you sell it, you could take section 121, right, which is the exclusion of 250,000 or 500,000 for a couple that is selling a primary residence. The fact that you also converted that to a rental property, if it was through the rental out to a unrelated party at fair market value, all that kind of stuff, rent site, then that would certainly qualify for the 1031. All depending on the property is new construction, what the use of that new construction.
It's to be a primary
Residence and would
because it has to be a rental.
it has to be an investment property, correct?
Yeah.
Absolutely, but you would still get, again, if you're selling it within the 5-year period, and 2 of that 5 years, you claim it as a primary, you can exclude up to $250,000 a day. So really, the 1031 piece would not be necessary if that covered all the day.
Okay, so what was that under
Section 121.
that for the 1031 or more?
That's for everybody. If anybody who's selling a primary residence, they are able to take that 250,000 for single, 500,000 for to exempt. See this fun?
Say it again, this is section 121.
Okay, so section 121 is the exclusion of tax on the gain of a resident or primary resident.
And then up to 500.
Of the 500 for joining. And you have to, 250 each, and you have to live in that for 2 out of 5 years. Now, 2 years doesn't have to be consecutive. It could be 1 year here, a couple years later, you live in it for another year, and you can claim it as your primary.
So just the second one is only for investment properties.
Yes, and I'm gonna go through the types of properties that qualify and certainly the types that do not qualify.
Land is not,
Absolutely is.
okay, so what I
Yes,
thought, okay, so no,
absolutely.
doesn't have structure.
Correct. as long as it's real property being exchanged for other real property. Yeah. Greater cash flow again, if I am in land. Land typically doesn't produce a lot of income unless I have some type of, lease on it. But I want to go towards a more income producing property for my years of growth. So I can exchange out of a non-cash flow or low cash flow to a higher cash flow property. In relocation, and I added this one in for last. It usually isn't in there, but I left it in there for purpose. So we're headquartered in Greenville, South Carolina, but a lot of our clients are from California, Texas, from Illinois, from the Northeast, because they are relocating their primary residences from those states here to the Carolinas. So we know that primary residences do not qualify for a 1031, but one of your questions when you begin to talk to this client, even though it's about their primary residence, is, by the way, do you happen to have investment property in Texas where you're moving from? It's a great question to ask, and people are usually pretty open with the types of investment properties they own where they are. So they say, yeah, I certainly do. I have a properties there. Okay, well, have you ever thought about maybe selling this property and buying a couple of rental properties here in the area where you're living? A lot of people like for those investment properties to chase them wherever they happen to be, right? Because they like to either drive by and see them or maybe they want to piece of property. So if you haven't been asking that question, certainly if you're working with anybody now, I'll go back and it's just another touch point, another point of beginning a conversation with the client about that they may have and they want to relocate here. All right, so let's look at an example. So we bought a piece of property 10 years ago for $100,000. And today we're selling it for $300,000. So I've got a gain of $200,000 in this piece of property that's going to be taxed. Certainly not out of the question these days. In that 10 years, I improved the property. I did some improvements to the bathroom, the kitchen, whatever it may be. And if you can do that for $15,000, you've done pretty well. But just $15,000 on improvements. I put in a closing cost of $5,000 just to put a round number in there. I know that's not correct, but we're selling it for $300,000. Now, my total capital gain is actually $180,000, not $200,000, because the improvements and the selling expense, that $20,000 is taken out of that taxable gain. So I've got a gain of $180,000. And I have accumulated depreciation. So since this is an investment property, the IRS allows me to depreciate that property a set amount every single year. So I went back and actually did the math, and it's true. It's $3,640 is the depreciation amount this person who owns the house can take every single year. So over the 10 years, I have this accumulated depreciation of $36,400. Okay. Those are our base numbers. And so this is how our taxes work. Federal capital gains at 15% is going to be taxed against this $180,000. So that means $27,000 of tax is going to be paid just from the capital gains. The depreciation recapture at 25%. 25% is off this on 36.4. So that's a tax of $9,100. State capital gains, I just put in at a flat 5%. That's taxed against this $180,000 to $9,000. The net investment income, that's taxed against this $180,000. We have just over $6,800. So my total tax liability in this transaction, non-1031, is $51,940. That's how much I'm going to pay the IRS at the end of the day when I file my taxes, and I have to pay that. So this is where I'm talking about from the deferral standpoint and having equity in the deal. I don't have to pay the $51,940. So I'm literally left with $295,000 to reinvest into replacement property, as opposed to paying tax and only having $243,060 to reinvest with.
The capital gain, so I'm just, my understanding is that as long as you don't sell within 2 years of purchase, you defer the capital gains, but that's, maybe I'm just
So the capital
crossing
gains,
those terms.
you really can't defer the capital gains on an investment sale unless you're doing a 1031.
Okay.
So that's the only way to
That's-
defer it.
okay.
There is a change in the capital gains rate. So if you sell a piece of property and you've owned it for less than a year, you're at short-term capital gains. And that is normally whatever your ordinary income tax rate is. So it could be 38%, could be 27%, whatever it may be. But once you've owned this piece of property for a year and a day, that's when we move over to long-term capital gains, which is this 15 or 20%.
If you're gonna pay that on an investment property, no matter how long.
Absolutely, and the thing is, you're gonna accumulate more depreciation. And so this tax is going to increase, probably this tax will too, because hopefully the more longer you own it, the more, gain you're gonna have in the property. So a new property or a recently purchased property, a newer, it can benefit from 1031, absolutely. Certainly someone who's owned a piece of property long-term, even if it hasn't appreciated as much as they thought it would, this appreciation recapture is well worth most of the time thinking about 1031.
I don't understand the math on the
course.
So what you're saying is if they have the equity gain of $180,000, they're gonna divide that by how many years from when the person purchased the home and when the equity grew? Is that when the 36,400 came from a year?
So, what is it? It's 27 years, I forget the number, 27 years, whatever it may be. 27 years for an investment property. Yeah, you take the purchase price of that property and you divide it by 27, basically, and that's the amount of depreciation you get to take every single year. It's a static number every single year.
So wait, say that again, you take the value,
I think that's right. Make sure my math's right.
sorry, I didn't mean to say on the spot.
Oh, you're good.
You know, the calculation, I'm gonna write it down.
The tax value?
That 100,000 divided by 27 is 37.3.
3703.
So I keep you.
So you take the price of the property
Mhm.
and you
Divided by. so
The 27.
I think- So you reverse the math. So if you say what times 3640 equals 100,000, right?
Mhm.
So you take 100,000 and divide it by 3640. It's 27.4.
Okay, so right.
well, yeah,
27 years, yeah, roughly. So, and this is what the IRS allows you to take, and I will tell you something that may be a bit surprising. Even if you do not take the depreciation each year on your taxes, the IRS at the end of the day will still tax you on depreciation recapture for what you could have done, not what you didn't do.
that's
Correct. So take the depreciation. So this annual depreciation that the IRS allows you to take, if along with your accountant or CPA, you say, I'm not going to take this depreciation on my property, even if you don't, the IRS says you have the ability to, and they will still tax you on the amount of depreciation you could have taken. So you'd still owe this even if you didn't enjoy the depreciation each year. Yes, sir.
So there's a table that they look at to come up with the accumulated depreciation.
Yeah, it's that 27 minus, or 27 divided by the original property price. Yeah, there'll be a set every single year, that will be the exact amount that you're able to take. Yeah,
So you gotta make sure that you have this.
always, always.
Because it.
Yeah, and you want to have, listen, the thing with CPAs, CPAs also specialize. And so you really want to talk with an accountant or a CPA who has real estate experience. That's what you need to do. They are certainly great guideposts, and I always refer my clients back to their CPA or attorney to make sure they're doing the right thing and they understand exactly what their tax benefit's going to be. So again, you see the power of the exchange.
Okay, so I just had a separate conversation, so
Go back.
going back to slide 4, sorry.
Okay.
When it says original price of the property, you stick with that, regardless of what the value, price of the property having, been in the double digits as far as in price value,
Certainly.
but you stay with the original price.
From the depreciation, yes.
Yeah, for the calculation.
Right, yes,
Okay.
because that's from day
Has nothing to
one.
do with the increase of value.
Nothing at all. Okay, so as I said, we'll talk about the qualified use, the values, the timeframes, and all that are involved. So again, I'll say this multiple times during our talk. The property that you are selling has to be a qualified use property, and that qualified use, again, is being held an investment or business. Those are the two requirements for a piece of property. As long as you've held it for one of those two things, then what we're looking at is truly anything that is considered real property. So yes, from raw land, I can exchange my raw land and I can go into a commercial building. I can sell my commercial building. I can go into a single family rental. I can sell my single family rental. I can go into a retail center, sell a retail center, go into multifamily, hotel, whatever it may be. As long as I'm holding it for investment or business use, bottom line. It doesn't have to be in the same state. It doesn't have to be the same category of property. Again, it doesn't have to be land to land. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. So the options are really wide on what you or your client can do from a 1031 standpoint when it comes to property.
And you say this is what about if you run your business outside of your home? Does that?
So, okay, so here's again, a great CPA to work with, okay? So can you have a section of your home that is used solely for business and experience the tax benefit of having a section of your home? Absolutely can. But I will tell you that you need to make sure that that room is used for nothing else. It can't be the living room, it can't be the kitchen. And all the time, absolutely. And your CPA should look at the size of the room, your use of the room, because that value that would be allocated to that 10 by 10 office, whatever you call it, is that way. So could you then do a 1031 on that piece? You could. I don't know if there would be a benefit, because probably it'll be covered by 121, and you probably haven't taken that much of a deduction from the investment standpoint on that office, but you would just have to make sure that when you sold, okay, this is all section 121, and this room that I can show you, I have appreciated over the past 7 years, this is potentially 1031. Yeah, absolutely. I don't see it a lot. Normally, I might see it if it's somebody who owns a home and they have a separate building that maybe they were a mechanic, a welder, it was a farm, and that's where they had all their equipment and ran the farming operation. There you go. Yeah, probably will, yeah, but there's certainly an ability to look at it. It may not work out financially, but it is there. The possibility exists. Absolutely. I will say, a 30-year ground lease does qualify as real property and as exchangeable. The reason I bring that up is when I'm working with somebody who owns a QSR, Hardee's, whatever else, and they leased the land where they built their property, right? So they own the building, but they don't own the land underneath. So they can still sell that and do an exchange as long as the lease is for a period of 30 years. And that could be a 5-year lease that has built-in options to extend it up to 30 years. But they can sell that as a 1031 real property as long as they have a 30+ year ground lease. So that's key.
And when you're going from multi-family to multi-family,
Mhm.
there's no limit. You can't go from 10 to 100 or
Yeah, you go to, yeah, units, the number of units won't matter. It's just that end price, what that market value is of those properties, or those units together. So that's what we can do. So let's talk about what we cannot do. Primary residences, certainly we discussed, off the table for a 1031. Vacation homes and second homes do not qualify for a 1031. The reason being is, to qualify as an investment property, the owner can have no more than 14 days of personal use, or 10% of the time in which that property has been rented. Okay, so number one, if they're not renting this property at all, and it's truly a second home or vacation home, it will not qualify. If they have some rental use, but they have more personal use than they're supposed to have, that will not qualify. But if they stay within the parameters and they begin to treat that as an investment property on their taxes after 2 years and renting it out for a minimum of 14 days each year at fair market value, and keeping their personal use, in that 2 years, it's qualified property and they can sell it and do a 1031.
What's the maximum number of days you can use for RP?
14 days or 10% of the time in which you've rented it. Yeah. And those 14 days, that also counts for family members that have stayed there for either free or for reduced rent. They're not paying fair market rent. Or if you have some type of arrangement where, okay, I'll let you stay in my condo for whatever, and you let me stay in y'all's beach house for whatever. Yeah, that doesn't count. That counts towards your personal days.
That's included Airbnbs, right?
I'm sorry.
That's also a class of Airbnbs, right?
Yes, absolutely, yes. For Airbnb, it's not seen any differently from a 1031 perspective, and certainly from county, city, they won't necessarily shine on them, but yeah, that's no problem, as long as they have had a, renter there for at least 14 days out of the year, then they're fine. And have the person use it to limit. Yes, please.
So I don't really understand what it is, like, you say 1031, house and title, what is that?
To close it.
So the 1031 is, that's the IRS code. So it's code section 1031. That's just the IRS code. So that's why we call it a 1031. End of the day, the 1031 is just the sale of one property and the purchase of another investment property. And you're working with someone like myself who's holding that money in between. And you get the deferral off of the gains of the property sold. So
So when you sell it, you need to tell, you was on the attorney, that's what you're doing, like, you can't do it after the fact.
you cannot do it after the fact. So you must have the exchange agreement in place before you close. And there, we'll talk about it here just a little bit about what those requirements are. But yes, you must let people know before you close on it.
Yeah, I mean,
Do
there's a
not take money.
timeline where you have to find the next property and.
Y'all are hitting all of it. Absolutely. Absolutely. Hitting all of it. All right. So just a couple of quick items. Partnership interest. So when I have a partnership that's selling a piece of property, so all of us together own the piece of property. We have somebody sell and they want to buy into our partnership. And we say, okay, I'll sell you, 10% interest in our partnership for $50,000. That does not qualify. Partnership interests are personal property, not real property.
So that's a question about that.
Yes.
If you do a refinance cash out, with
Mhm.
that, well, did you do with that, or you did not do that?
Oh, I'm telling you, no, I'm telling you, absolutely. So yeah, you can certainly refinance a piece of property. So the question is, okay, well, I wanted to sell this investment property and I needed the cash because I wanted to go do whatever with it. But then I found out I owe a lot of tax on this money that I would walk away with. So they do the 1031, they defer their taxes, and after they have purchased the replacement property, they refinance that piece of property, pull that cash out tax-free and go do whatever it is they need to go do with that money anyway. So yes, that's very possible.
So you said in the partnership, Steve,
Mm-hmm.
that that's only for residential property, again, that's not for like investment, if I go and visit with. And I can't, you can't buy the other property together?
You absolutely can, yes, absolutely. The partnership can buy a piece of property. The partnership can sell it and do a 1031, and the partnership can go back and buy the replacement property. That's no problem at all. The problem would be if I wanted to enter into your partnership and you were to sell me a percentage of your partnership. Well, I'm actually buying into the partnership and not ownership of the real property. The real property is owned by the partnership, but that's not what I'm buying. I'm buying an interest in that overall partnership. So that's what doesn't qualify.
Of existing
1431.
properties that are in their portfolio. But what about if they, let's say that I joined his partnership and the next day we close on a property that is now, I'm part of that. Could that moving
Yeah,
forward?
that would be no problem because that partnership existed.
Yeah, in
And
the
you were
partnership
in-
has to do first before you own the property that you're in.
You just can't, you can't do it for the percentage you sold.
Correct.
Correct, yeah. That's a
Doesn't
personal
make
problem.
sense at all. Well, yeah, the partnership just has to be in place. Right.
Yeah, and you're just buying in the partnership and you're just part of that exchange and you're deferring the portion of taxable gain that would have been your pro rata share in that partnership. Yeah, please.
So that's not to ask you. But, so let's say I have, you know, sell it, I do that 5 more times. Let's say I catch up, all this deferred tax, is it hit at one time, or is it?
You get money. Continue to sell and defer if you pass away. And that's what I mean, while we go into this day, the ones who inherit the property is set up in place in the taxes.
I did.
Oh, it does, right? They're doing here? Wow,
And
that's.
so let's say that you bought a piece of property for 100,000. Throughout the years, doing a 1031, you end up with a $10 million portfolio of properties. Well, you're still gonna have that original basis, 100,000 in that piece of property. But again, when you pass away, property goes to the state, you get a step up in basis, and children inherit the piece of property, and they inherit what that fair market value is. And I mean, there's no tax, all that tax has disappeared. Now, if they happen to sell it, and they sell it above what that step up in basis is, they'll have a gain, and that's, they can do an exchange or just pay it and go on.
So let me ask you this, whenever you, and that's for the, when you pull up the tax form, is there gonna be any verbiage or anything for that specific parcel to let you know that it's part of, like, you know what I mean? So nothing there.
No identification on there that would say they did a 1031.
Thank you for that.
Okay, so I have one more question.
Yes,
Sorry.
please. No, you're right.
So we currently have a second home that we don't rent out, or maybe let people use it and whatever, but if we officially made that a rental property and then of course pay taxes on it, it would take 2 years with no more than 14 days of personal use to then be qualified for the 1031 exchange. Did I get that right?
And you must rent it at fair market value.
Well, yeah, right, it would be
Yeah,
rented.
right, yeah, absolutely. As long as you've done that
So you
for
rent
2 years.
less than, I don't think you would, but if you rented it for like a family member, less than fair market value, that like.
That counts toward your 14 days of personal use.
What does that mean for, that's kind of ambiguous. I mean, who determines what fair market value is? Like, I'm renting this house out to my in-laws, and we are definitely not charging them. I mean, it's not, and it's free, but we're definitely not
So-
charging
so
them
what
what we
would you-
could,
what would
because
you
of
rent?
family.
What would you rent to people? Same thing as them?
No, wait a second.
I mean, not just, I think, it's different.
The difference though.
Yeah, there might be a difference in seasonal rents. Right, if you have a beach property, And it's on the beach, the rent in December might be very different than the rent in July. Okay, it might be a seasonal. Typically, the way I would look at this, I'm extremely conservative when it comes to rules and everything that are going to pass. Extremely conservative. If I wanted to convert a second home to a true rental, then I'm going to put it with a property management firm. I'm going to show that it has been advertised, it's been out there. When it is rented, it's rented at fair market rate, because that's not me. If family goes, they go to property management and they pay the same thing that I would pay if I'm trying to rent it out. And that way, you have a track record to show, this is how I treated this property. And I don't know if you've ever been through an audit. You ever been through an audit?
You can't say to them, well, that was my mom, why should I?
No, I just wanted to know the rules about who determines the fair market
No,
value.
it's free.
It's only if you're caught.
Yes, you're right. The only time that you would be audited is, okay, so when you're 1031, you have to follow the city law, maybe in 24 hours, sort of see that, and they're going to look over it, and they're going to call you, because you didn't do very well, and you should. Now, there's a chance, and I work with a lot of people who are very, very risk adverse, and I have folks who are very, very, I will push, and I will do anything I can to. That's the, I have both, right? But again, for my conservative side, absolutely, I put it with a property management group, and that way I know it's been rented out correctly, fair market value, I've treated it as an investment property on my taxes, and I can show that for at least 2 years.
And you were that, you were the property manager, that's what I was gonna say. You know, some of it myself, like I'm the property manager.
Right. I would, okay, so yeah, if I was the IRS and I mean that and all of you, I would do a search and see what's in one office and do that. I could pull the history of anything you've ever done. We'll look through it and see if I can show that. You put something there, I mean, as long as you're, listen, as long as you can take this for what you do, listen, if I chose to rent it out for $400, I would give an explanation of why. Why am I renting it out for $400? If I'm renting it out for $400, then I'm not everybody for $400. Or if I decrease or increase the rent, I'm giving an explanation. Write it down in my room. This is why I'm doing it. It's in the end. This is why I'm doing this. I want a clear track record. So I would think like I would here. What else do you want? Sorry. I like it. So being an intermediary, my job is to make sure that the exchange agreement was set up within 31, in place before they close on the sale of their property. I'm working with the closing attorneys, the title companies, whichever way they may be, making sure that the closing statement is correct. Everybody has to make a work sign, this needs to be signed. I'm doing the same thing on the back end, making sure that everything's correct. Money is there, ready to close when they buy a property. Doesn't matter the amount of sale of property, might be $1,500. That's what I charge.
And so when do you come into the picture? Right?
I will say that the earlier I can come into the picture, the better. Because typically there's a lot of questions and a lot of things that I can help with. Now, I'm not a tax advisor, cannot be. Just in the same way you can't be an attorney or a CPA for your clients, I can't do the same with you. So I'm an independent third party person. Absolved from what the transaction actually is. So the earlier the better. Make sure we have questions answered. Nothing is a surprise for the client and they would close them. Yeah, I mean, earlier the better.
So normally how far in advance, like say for instance, I'm a seller, telling me about this, and they're like, oh, I want to do this. How far in advance should they start that process before you release the property? Is there like a window or like a month, 30 weeks or?
Yeah, if I were in your shoes, and somebody said, Jennifer, I want to do this. Okay, let's go with all the qualified engineer and let's go ahead and ask the question for you. Because they might have some, how do I list it? What am I supposed to have? What do I need to know when they're talking to? All these things we can talk about, ahead of time. And listen, we're only doing yourself in a fine favor of being ready to talk earlier in the process.
I would want to know, like, take for instance, if someone like, I need to get out of my house in 2 months. And if that initial process takes like 3 or 4 weeks for that to go through and get that.
Yeah.
I mean, they just enough big of time. Even.
Like from my side, I want to get them to get everything in place and ready to go. So certainly I'd like to talk to them before we're ready to close the table and go, oh, great, it's super easy, I want to do this. That'd be good. Thank you.
Right. I'm around your property, you have it's not permanent. Why would I have to sign?
Because the IRS says that if I completed a temporary one, then another party can come back and those people.
The ones that sell the to not, but is there time?
Yes.
You have to,
Good question.
yeah, you have a certain number of days to identify a property that you are interested in doing the exchange for.
Okay, let's talk about this real quick, then we're gonna get into the time frame. At the end of the day, the IRS tells us if you want a full tax deferral on your property, if you sell for $100,000, they want you to buy it. That's it. Sell for $1 million, they want you to buy for at least $1 million. That's for a full tax deferral. They want to make sure that you use all of your equity from the sale into that new property. Okay, that's bottom line. And I'll give you another example. Okay, so let's say I'm selling for $1 million. I have a $500,000 note on the property. So when I sell the property, cash is going to go out of that sale to pay off that note, and I'm left with $500,000 at closing. The IRS says, Matt, use all of that $500,000 in cash, and you still have to buy $1 million property. So what's the solution? You go out and you buy it, or you get another note so that you can mortgage whatever you need, so you can buy the $1 million property. Okay. The IRS will tax you on the debt relief, just as they will cash. So in that $1 million example, $500,000 debt, if you didn't replace the debt and you used all of your cash, you're still going to get taxed on the debt relief, because that is a benefit to you. You no longer have this debt, and they will tax you on that $500,000 of debt relief. Okay, so that's why if you sell for $1 million, buy for $1 million, either get a new loan so you can do that, or maybe you have your own cash and you can put your own cash into the deal to buy that property for the value.
You tax on the million, that's profit,
You are taxed off of anything that you walk away with up to what your gain would be in that amount. So again, yes, for full tax deferral, you want to make sure everything is used. But if you sold for $1 million and you only want to buy for 900, you can do that. Just know that you'll potentially be taxed on the $100,000 that you walk away with. So it's not an all or nothing.
Purchasing a higher property and value.
Fantastic. Absolutely. Yeah. If you want to do at least what you sold for, or
Minimal is that.
yeah, if you want a full tax deferral, absolutely. Yeah.
You got more than one property?
You absolutely may. Absolutely may.
If you're selling multiples and going into one, you just have to add up all those prices, a lot of add up all those.
Yeah, and there's a couple of different ways you could do that. You could either just do one exchange and all of those properties go into that exchange and you're buying that one replacement property. There's an advantage in that your fees you would pay to qualified intermediary would be lessened. You would have less closings that you would have to go through. So that's one advantage. The disadvantage is your 45-day and 180-day periods are set on the sale of that first property. So if you put 10 properties in, that first one sells, that's when your time clock begins. It doesn't matter when these others sell, but they have to sell and you have to have that cash in before 180 days. So let's take a second and go over our time frames. When I close on my piece of property, selling, I have 2 time clocks that begin to tick. And the first one is a 45-day identification period. So the IRS tells us that I have 45 days to identify potential replacement property. And those 45 days are straight calendar days. So Saturdays, Sundays, holidays, birthdays, rainy days, and Mondays, they all count in that 45 days. I'm gonna go over the amounts that we can identify in just 1 second. Again, from the time that I sold this piece of property, my other time clock is the 180-day exchange period. So I have 180 days to actually close and take title to any or all of the properties that I identified and complete my 1031. Okay. So this 45 days is included in the 180, so you only have 6 months or 180 days total exchange period. So if you're working with a client who is contemplating a 1031, or they're in the midst of one, and they are a little irritated or pushy, because clients are never like that anyway, if you all of a sudden happen to come across one that is, you might know why, because they are very concerned about this 45-day identification period. Once they identify something, and they will do that on a form that we provide them that says, "Hey, Matt, here are the properties that I want to identify." Midnight of the 45th day, whatever they have on record with us as identified, chisel it in stone. That is what they would have to buy if they want to complete a 1031. There's no ability to change your identification after the 45 days. Doesn't matter if the house caught on fire, it doesn't matter if the seller pulled it off the market, it doesn't matter to the IRS. Okay,
So I want to be clear with it, come down to, I understand this is specifically for the veteran business.
correct.
So when you have folks that have personal properties, that they're selling, it could be a married couple that have 2 different properties that they own, and another one that they own. But if they want to sell those other 2, and they only use it personally, they can do that, and this doesn't apply. The IRS doesn't do this with their personal properties, taxing them on the, I guess, the profit from selling their properties. If they sold for it in 1999 for $100,000, now it's $300,000. That $200,000 that they profited, what's the deal?
It's gonna be taxed. And then there's no, yeah, and there's no deferral and there's no exemption. It's just going to be straight tax. So they'll get the exemption on primary residence, the deferral through the 1031. But if I truly have a second home or vacation home, it's not. So the 1031 is the only way to defer your tax. Section 131 is the only way to exempt it if it was a primary residence. But second home or vacation home qualifies for. Doesn't
Nothing.
qualify for either one of those.
Okay.
It's just tax.
These are the properties destroyed, or down. It doesn't matter. So we're if it was $1 million, I had to spend, the property cost $1 million. It burns down, it's condemned, and now it's worth 200,000. I'm gonna get taxed on 800,000 if I buy it.
No, I'm talking about the identification, whatever you identify, not the one you're selling, but
So
anything you identify.
identification just means you're putting it on the form to give to you.
That's exactly right. There is. When you identify a piece of property, you are simply writing down the address, whatever you would put in the contractor's bill, the description of that property, that's how you identify. Tax map, plat number, condo, so-and-so address, unit number, X, Y, Z, whatever it may be. That's how you need to identify. And I'll provide the form. It doesn't have to be for sale. You don't have to have it under contract. It's just
You're
any
saying, I'm
property.
considering this property for this.
Exactly, yeah. This is a property I'd like to have. Hopefully I can get it under contract. Hopefully I could close on it, but I definitely like this property. It's great if you do have a contract on it, but you don't have to. Okay,
So how many chances do they give you? Like, say for instance, within that 45 days, you identify the property, you're under contract, and then it just falls apart, right?
for the million reasons that it can.
Right, so let's just say, okay, the seller is like, forget about it, like, if I'm gonna qualify for this, I don't want to do it. Will they allow them like 6 months later, if they want to do it again, to try again?
Yeah, I mean,
No,
those timelines are hard.
No, they're
Yeah.
hard.
They're like,
Like,
No, that's whenever you close on the property, you have 45 days to identify.
oh, because you've already closed.
We
Okay.
closed.
Fine.
So if you have only did one property, identified one property, it didn't blew up, and you're not gonna buy it, you're screwed up.
Can you multiple possible properties in that 45 days?
Yes,
Oh,
so here are
sorry.
rules.
I forgot.
And the most used rule is the three property rule. So you can identify 1, 2, or 3 properties. It doesn't matter what the value of those properties are. Okay, you're selling for $1 million, you identify 3 properties and the combined value of those 3 properties is 20 million, the IRS doesn't care. Any 3 properties. Now, the discussion I get in with clients is, okay, Matt, I sold my piece of property, I'm gonna identify property B, that's the property I want, that's the property I'm gonna close on, and I'm like, that's fantastic, okay. What happens for the million reasons that it can, if that property falls through?
You had better find another one within your 45 days, or you're gonna be paying taxes on day 47.
So what are you doing for your client?
Well, at 5 o'clock on day 45, or whatever it is, whatever they're
Midnight and 45.
midnight. Day, if you have not identified, you have not told them what that property is you're gonna exchange for,
It's
just
dead.
be prepared to take that check the next day
That's it.
on whatever the taxes would have been.
So if I'm you, and I know they're gonna do a 1031, I'm out there showing them multiple properties, and even though they want property B, I'm gonna say, get in the car with me, because we're gonna find property C and D, just in case B falls through, because I don't want you to have to pay the taxes if you don't want to. So let's go out and look at additional properties. So 3 properties, up to 3, 1, 2, or 3, doesn't matter their value, but still, if you sell for $1 million, you have to buy for $1 million, okay? And of those 3 properties, you can buy 1 of them, you can buy 2 of them, or you can buy all 3 of them. 200% rule. If I'm selling for $1 million, I can identify 4 properties, 9 properties, 20 properties. As long as the total of all those properties that I've identified is not more than twice the amount of property I sell. So if I sell for $1 million, I identify 20 properties. Those 20 properties combined cannot be more than $2 million. I mean, it's difficult, it looks difficult, but it's not, okay? So if they have to identify more than 3, they'll go to this rule. This one I just have up here, I've only seen it used about 3 or 4 times in my entire career. But if they have to do more than 4, and all of a sudden they found out that the properties they identified was 5 million instead of $1 million, I don't know why they do it, but anyway. Then as long as they buy 95% of the value of those properties they identified, they still have a valid 1031. But 3 property rule, 95% of the time is what I deal with. Why am I important to the deal? The simple sale of an investment property and the purchase of another investment property is not a 1031. Okay. There has to be a qualified intermediary involved, somebody to hold that money in between. The person that sells that property cannot touch the money from the sale. They cannot have constructive receipt. And that's why at closing, the money goes from the attorney's escrow account directly to the qualified intermediary in an account we've established specifically for this transaction. So directly from attorney to the qualified intermediary. We're going to go through the 45 days. We're hopefully going to close before day 180. And when you go to close to buy that replacement property, that's why it's going directly from me to that closing attorney's escrow account. It's never touching the taxpayer in between. And then they make the purchase. That's a 1031.
For your payment, the 1,500, are there restrictions on who pays that? Who normally pays it?
So typically it's going to show up as a line item on the closing statement to the seller, to my
Okay, just
client.
making sure, you know,
Yeah.
there's some things with like VA that, you
No,
know.
listen,
When you sell the first property on the sale.
we always have the fee at closing of the first property.
Okay.
And it's on the closing statement, and the reason we do that is twofold. Number one, we want to make sure we get paid. Okay, that's number one. But number two, and more significant is that $1,500 used to pay the fee for the qualified intermediary, that $1,500 is deferred as well. It's a
Okay.
qualified expense, and so they don't have to come out of pocket with it. They can actually use exchange funds to pay that $1,500 at closing, and it's deferred. But
Okay.
that's really the main reason.
But it's
to do
the
it.
seller who pays it out of their.
It's the seller who will pay it. Now, that's not to say that the buyer couldn't say, I'll pay it for you. Be fine, but there's no,
Yeah, no one said no one ever.
said no one ever. Exactly right. Exactly right.
What question should we be asking at clients?
So I would ask them, first off, if you talk to your CPA, and then if you talk to your manager, and that was. No, okay, I would advise you to talk to them. Have you talked to the qualified intermediary yet? No, okay. We know someone, we know a few people, whatever. I don't know if you're likely, I mean, refer to somebody, usually it's 1, 2, 3, maybe they probably you or more. How they use the property, what do you use it for? Have you thought about where you might want to property? I mean, those are just the general questions, and that usually gets going and. But it's just like the big one, talk with about, buy, what are they gonna buy, where they're gonna buy, and when they. What do you, and they think you could, yes, and so you stop, you know, and where you want to buy. So.
That's good. So let's say I'm doing, I want to go from one to multiple. So if I sell the property for $500,000, pay up at $500,000. I want to go into 2 or 3. And I'm gonna buy another property, and maybe one is 800 and another one is 600. The funds that I have, do I get to choose how much goes to which one, or is it split?
You choose whichever one goes to, and the reason that that benefit is there is one property might be easier to finance than the other.
Okay.
And so you might want more equity going to one property, you're gonna split the funds, and less to the other, because that one, you can get these or whatever the case may be.
Okay.
But you can bifurcate those funds however you want to pass those two
Because
properties.
the items didn't care, they only care about the final total amount.
Let me ask you a question, saying within those between 45 days and 180 days, you have the money, right? So how long is it? Excellent.
So that money is, we call your estate, still continues on everything. So it continues on to your estate, and if the estate wants to buy another piece of property for that tax deferral, they can. If they don't want to, then they simply let the temporary loan expire, program expire, and then we turn the money over to.
After 180 days.
Because they only pay on that one property, not the. Putting that down in pool for, the property to be very. That person kind of referred like 8 properties, and died in the middle of some, state, you don't pay the tax.
If there's something not to do.
Right, the heirs can complete this,
Yeah,
if
but
it's
it's only on.
That's being sold, not the person that dies in pool of growth.
talking about the 4 or 5 tasks.
The one is in limbo, there. That's on, that's the one that is in tax.
Also, they did not give us taxes, person that inherited.
State is different from the people who get it. State is where the property is distributed. State is where it's staying. Then once the computer fails, and that property will pass over to the payer, and then we can settle it, right? Otherwise, if the state doesn't agree with what they want, they have to file a tax form and tax on the sell that piece of property. It's still going to the state, and our money goes to the state, and we should have.
Oh, that's the taxes on the way to the tax.
They do go away from people who care. They
Right.
don't go away for purchase of damage if they do not agree to it. So, So we're talking. He sells a, he's doing the 1031 into the, that's the problem. And he's on a,
Where you been?
and they said, well, there's 75 years along with this. He still has a period of time that he could on a piece of property, the one piece of property that they did would stay. Could still, not have identified property and have to do it. So that's done. Let's say he sold for 100 and he fined for 100. But there's original basis in this property is 25. So he's going to get the full office $75 right here. And so it's going to go to the estate, this $100,000 property, and then it's going to go to the heirs. And they're going to go to the property that's the basis of these heirs are not.
Right, they could sell if they wanted to, and
Now they can sell the.
They can do with it, they were.
Yeah, I mean, they sold the fair market value, I mean, they sold it for what they inherited before, fair market value. Then they inherited that as far as fair market value, they sell above that. That's the piece of it.
I mean, they have the limits.
So if it happens in this day, the $100,000 property fair market value is actually $150. Yes, then that's what the basis is, and if they sell for $150, they don't really want to. Not really.
As long as they keep that as investment property, they move into it, then they've got, if they pay, then they,
Well, they don't have to do it very long.
no, not 1031, but they would just have to pay capital gains if it was personal property.
So these are just the basics. Lots of questions, lots of ideas, a lot that we did not discuss. So you can see how much time might have worked with the past to make sure that everything's answered. You're comfortable with the logic, you're comfortable with the terms. So I'm gonna have a question on when to get someone like myself involved. This is.
ASAP.
This is why.
I have a client who, they owned a home. Their father lived in Henrysburg, their father lived in it and paid them rent, so it was a true rental and at fair market value.
Did he treat it as his primary residence?
It was the father's primary residence.
And then, so in that case, if I'm renting to a relative and they're paying the rent, but they're treating it as their primary residence, that's fine.
Yeah, and that's what they did. They so,
If
So
that
he-
relative is treating it as their primary residence.
yeah,
I mean, we're still paying the rent.
right.
For fair market value, but it doesn't cause any problem to me as an owner because they're paying fair market rent.
Right. He passed away and they sold it and bought it 1031.
So they already had 1031 in place.
Now, they sold that property to 123 Maple Street. That was the property that he lived in, that he was renting back, to them. He passed away, they sold that, and within 45 days, identified a property at the beach, and they moved there. Yeah,
They bought it to rent out,
correct,
Oh.
another investment property.
so they did exchange.
Right, but they moved, that's where they live.
So, I'll give you very quick.
They don't live in that house, they live in that area.
So I live on the farm, raised cattle, made, doing that.
What's your house?
So, when I didn't want the family farm, on that side to sell. And house, homestead, and they split off the acreage. So they sold the house and the acreage, or they sold the homestead. And the minority, they took the section 141. Then when they sold the land, they sold the land for the 1031. They went down to the beach, they found the house, they eventually have to move into as their primary residence. Bought the house at the beach in 1031. Rent that property out for 5 years, because like, you're telling, rent it out for 5 years, within 5 years, it moves into it. And they treat that as a primary residence. Since they bought that property through a temporary loan and turned it into primary residence, now I'm saying you're giving them time to do it before you take section 141 there. So they're living there 10 years, sell it. So there are ways of being strategic about how you go about selling this property, how you buy an investment property, and what is typically used of it down the road.
A question I have is, I have sometimes finding them really difficult. If you have somebody who just called you, you can say, I want a 1031, I don't have a broker, I don't have anything, where do you go for 1031?
I would go not to, you know, if they say, I want to, where,
You're not finding property there.
no, I don't do, I don't sell my property, I only,
Because I see lots of listings, in commercial, that are, in everyone's value.
so yeah, we have a statistic that, 80% of the world service.
Yeah.
And this is a huge amount. So my question today would be, where do you want that? What areas are you going to? What kind of company do you want? I'm just saying, we're trying to see CPAs to look at. We're not doing so this is my cell phone number. Call me, text me with your questions, scenarios, if something happens to go wrong, here. That doesn't have to be temporary process. What do is what happens. And then there's probably an answer for you, or this is really something they ask for CPA, this is not. So that's.
Yeah, CPA, you represent like
What's not bundled? Yeah, it's not confused.
Charlotte.
I mean, that's what Zoom, I mean, Charlotte, I'm thinking North Carolina.
Yeah, Charlotte, I'm
me, I mean, there's a lot of CPAs, I would just, I know there's a lot of CPAs. All of them are. They're just not, it can be yours. You got some kind of knowledge too, you go in and talk.
The thing that I see most. That's really the lead. Years. Before around the more than 3 months. How they have this. We don't have engagements. I think well, listen, I hope this has been efficient.
No, yeah.
A lot of time, it's not most fun, conversation, but.
Yeah. You don't think I'm telling you, okay. The problem is, if you have real property, you sell it. That's when you're gonna be taxed.
Or something else.
Right. And you have, you didn't do that, 1031 private.
There.
Wait, something else say, I'm not going to go there, I don't want to talk. I think there's the lowest capital gain here. Over the years, the lower amount of taxes that are paid, farm laws and. Very good back then, but back then,
She might have.
Especially when you're now being the event.
Yeah, good genes.
So it was changed in 2008. So I built, we gave a collaboration, station name, education center, from the beginning.
When you're good, when you get invited, that's about a second home.
I did it as a second.
So you're good if you decided to convert it over to it.
I have to do it for 2 years. So the story behind it is my in-laws are down in the coast looking for a place to purchase. And they have a home in Tennessee, and taking care of grandma in Virginia. I mean, she's a hot freaking mess. So they're there temporarily, split between 3 households. And so, but what we have never, while we charge them rent, we have never paid taxes on that. But again, we would not then turn around, I like to sleep at night. I would not turn around and try to do it in the 1031 exchange. I would do the 2 years of fully vested investment property at full market value. And then, because we want to buy, as soon as we get them figured out, we want to buy different property, like further north in the Gulf Stream. Where we are in Wilmington, it's 3 hours to the Gulf Stream, it's just too far. So we want to go north, like Beaufort or, like that. So potentially, I'm just brainstorming with my husband about what the next plan is. And potentially, 2 years, and then we can do it's fully worth it because that property is, I don't know, it's like 400,000. I mean, I'm looking at the taxes on 100,000. Why? I might get the government any more money back. Right. Well,
When she bought a house first, but she didn't have to sell her design, and then she sold the one that she was living in. Right? Same one, she was there. And her mother in law, she was on the team. So it was like her house. So what's her mother-in-law got? She was on the decent, she could sell it. And it was paid off. So that property, is she going to be charged at tax on
Is it inheritance tax at that point?
She would only be.
Oh, she's not a carryover.
She only should be.
Taxes.
She don't get that 250. But the one that she sold the first time, because that was. She was in 205. She was in 205. She never did it. But she would not get it. However, her husband would.
So you can, I will be probably going from the. For,
So they are. Not on the proceeds, but on the sale. Sorry.
all the. So
Okay.
again, just that property and that just.
Fifteen. Oh, what's the definition of improvement?
Say if you had to get the flooring done, say if you had to get the roof, say if you had to do all that stuff.
Because there's a difference between,
Maintenance improvement.
yeah, like,
Something to improve.
yeah, but I want to know their definition on it. Like, if it needs to do AC, I don't consider that we, as agents, consider that maintenance.
So the best, yeah, it's that's the problem, and I have to find a way to be.
Yeah, that's maintenance. That's not included in, yeah, same, yeah. All these homeowners will be like, but I did that, I'm like, yeah, no,
I'm putting in.
It doesn't matter.
I'm putting in windows.
that's an improvement. Like, if you go from wood windows to, efficiency, yes, for sure.
But
But
I'm
if
thinking,
it's so repairs are not improvements. If you got a hole in your roof, that's a repair, that's maintenance, that's not improvement. And improvement is something that increases the value. Now, if you put a new roof on a house, does that intrinsically improve the value in the market to a buyer? Yes. But not, you can't, just like we would tell a seller, you pay $15,000. I do a CMA and it tells me that your home is valued at 300, you don't get to go 350. It doesn't work that way.
There's
So there's a fine line between.
on certain type of equipment. Kitchen upgrade, we're gonna have fire alarm, bathroom upgrade.
Yeah. Exterior,
Finished basement is not necessarily going to have a house. For patio, but I think not necessarily going to have a house.
Right.
There is some.
it's, yeah.
so, okay, being that they didn't live in a house, they lived in their primary residence, and it wasn't written out. So if, like, when they say if they had to do a lot of work to list it, you can't minus that, what they did, what they would cost from the listing price. Say the listing price was 200, and they spent 20,000. Getting it ready for. Just to list. So, I mean,
Still have a machine. It's painting walls.
okay,
It's doing this,
all for it. I mean, yeah, there's nothing wrong with the flooring that you have. Whatever what she needs to do, she needs to, they asked us everything, they think that we specialize in everything, about code, taxes, and I said, this is what I recommend you do, because I don't give you any wrong information, I recommend you get a real estate CPA. Because if you try to go somewhere locally and they don't specialize in real estate, then what's gonna happen is these deductions, you're gonna miss out on. And that's my second. Right,
And help them know that. Other than that. So that's. That's the.
Need a little training, I mean, yeah, there's some good training here, is,
Yeah.
the one that do, I mean, the CPAs.
Yeah.
Because that's what's gonna help you. Okay, I will. There are things that are far as when you live money, they were very nice. And
Yeah.
And, you know. When that's why they don't hear any excuses, they won't be. So if they want, show them. Me too, I have to.
It's, you know, I'm so people say, well, I'm also fear that. And I will be talking to the university. And there's two changes. It's vastly fascinating. The first evening, I all the language in the
If you buy investment property, years, the best thing to do is it best to do the 1031? Yeah, I mean, only if you're gonna replace it. So if you're not, just go ahead and pay taxes.
We don't probably what you might
He had a major events. And, he wants to be educated.
Well, for him and for you, as everybody else, we really want to get some direction from them. And it's kind of just, he, I'm getting about her really wrong.
I'm gonna tell you why, when I first started, it's like.
Yeah.
I wasted too much time.
Every dollar they save in trying to buy something is a dollar that they profit. Yeah, it's just,
I mean, and people are low ball, you know, people so stupid on the altar, and that's not my niche.
right.
And I know that, you know, he's saying, he does very well with that, and he has good investors.
That's cool.
I mean, real good investors.
Yeah,
They trust him and they have the money to buy these properties. They're not just those they investors.
right.
But thank you so much. I am going to email you.
Yeah, you're
And,
very welcome.
here you go. I'm gonna get Katie, oh, give me your business cards for Katie. Just give me a couple of them.
And, because Katie works with, investors as well.
Okay. Glad to be a help.
Oh, yeah, this was very, we have like 200 agreements now.
Right.
Oh, we get that one?
Where are you guys at in Wilmington?
So we have a Lord have mercy, husband, yes, we have been in